New user access. Control C.2. And it matters because of a simple truth: the moment you grant someone access is the moment the risk enters your organization. Here's the breach that proves it. February 2015. Anthem, one of the largest health insurers in the United States, discloses a breach exposing the personal information of roughly 78.8 million people. Names, social security numbers, medical IDs, addresses, employment information, income data. They paid $115 million to settle the class action, and regulators required comprehensive access management reform. The way-in was a phishing email, opened by an employee who held database administrator privileges. That is unremarkable. Phishing succeeds every day. What made it catastrophic was what that one account could reach: a data warehouse containing records for very nearly every member and employee Anthem had. But the phishing wasn't the real failure. The real failure was that the account was too powerful in the first place. Administering a database legitimately requires broad access to schema, users, and performance configuration. It does not require unrestricted read access to 78 million member records. Those are two different things, and they had been combined into one account. Nobody had ever validated that scope against what the job actually needed. So what is new user access? It governs how a person's access is established when they join the organization or change roles. The standard is least privilege. Every user gets the minimum access needed to perform their job, granted against documented approval, and no more than that. Without it, 4 things go wrong. Overprovisioning creates the insider opportunity, and most insider breaches start with legitimate access that was simply broader than it needed to be. An overprovisioned account is a far more valuable target for an external attacker. A credential that reaches finance, HR, and customer data is worth far more than a narrow one. Access granted with no documented approval means no accountability and no baseline to review against later. And provisioning by copying a colleague inherits everything that colleague accumulated over years, including temporary access nobody ever removed. At Anthem, the gaps were structural. No least privilege standard applied at the point of provisioning. Access reflected operational convenience. No separation between administrative access and data access, which is the single most important design decision in a database environment. No formal approval process with business justification, so there was nothing for an auditor to verify or a reviewer to challenge. And copycat provisioning, replicating accumulated rights from one person to the next. So what does good look like? A role-based model, where permissions are defined at the role level rather than per person. A finance analyst role has a defined permission set, and a new analyst gets exactly that. A formal access request approved in writing by the person's direct manager, specifying role, systems, and business justification, with IT provisioning from the approval rather than a phone call. A documented, repeatable procedure so provisioning does not depend on someone's judgment about what seems reasonable. Sensitive systems requested and justified separately from general access. And a joiner-mover-leaver process, so access is granted on join, revised on internal move, and revoked on leave. How does an auditor test it? You sample people who joined during the period and request the access request in manager approval, then confirm what was actually provisioned matches what was approved. You compare the access users hold against the documented rights for their role, and anything beyond it needs its own approval. You check nobody had access provision before their start date, which is a finding in itself. You assess whether the role definitions are granular enough to mean anything. And you look specifically for copycat provisioning, then test whether the source profile was even appropriate. 5 lessons. 1. Define your roles before you provision anyone. Building the role catalog is foundational work that pays back across the whole access lifecycle. 2. Require written manager approval every time, because that is what creates accountability and gives you an evidence base for later reviews. 3. Never provision by copying another user. Their accumulated access is not a role definition. 4. Separate administrative access from data access, which is precisely the control that would have contained Anthem. And 5. Revalidate every new starter at 90 days, because people accumulate extra access fast in their first months, and that is when to catch it. New user access is Control C.2 in the ITGC framework. I'm walking through every one with the breach that proves why it matters every week at marcoweb.org. Subscribe to get them in your inbox, and try the free ITGC audit tool.